Okay.
In your own experience in studying languages,
Yes.
were the materials bilingual or only
Actually, I'm going to get into that a little later too, but every book I've ever used to study a second language has been in English at lower levels. I've got an advanced Italian book that I think it's in, I don't even know what language it's in, I just read it, because I just want to get the information so I can use it. I'd be hard pressed to know if it was in, I think that book's, I know I've got one that's in Italian, but you know, I can read, I know what subjunctives are, I use it as a reference book, but if I were trying to learn Italian from it, subjunctives, when you're coming from an English background, good luck trying to learn. It's called the congiuntivo in Italian, and it's brutally difficult. It's just, there's 2 verb systems for everything in Italian, and trying to get my head around that one. Actually, what happened in I took a first-year Italian class. My first degree is in actually medical genetics, believe it or not. That's, I'm a science geek at heart, and I needed a language credit. So I'd taken French, and my first girlfriend ever, back more expose stuff, my very first girlfriend was an Italian-Canadian girl. And so I learned how to say, where's the bathroom, and I learned how to swear from her dad and stuff like that. So I thought, well, I'll take Italian as easy credits. And it was about halfway into the class, it was just a 3-month night school kind of thing. I asked the teacher, how can I say, like, I think something? And he says, you can't say that yet. Well, what do you mean I can't say that? Well, you don't have the grammar for that yet.
Yeah.
Because in Italian, means is. You can't say penso che è. You have to say penso che sia. You have to use congiuntivo. You have to use a different verb system. But you don't know that yet. That's at the end of the book. So just to say, I think, fill in the blank, I had to wait until the last unit of that book. Because that's the way that grammatical difficulty, when syllabuses are determined by grammatical complexity, and pretty much every textbook in the market is, I'm proud to say this one isn't, because I just hate that kind of stuff. That's what happens. You're forcing your students into these little, the only things they can learn. So, anyway, break, and break. Okay.
Okay, before we get started, before Mike gets started again, I'd like to remind everyone about the deadline for submissions, which is coming up, fast approaching, July 25th, so that's less than 2 weeks away. Less than 2 weeks away. The submissions for our weekend of conference, Saturday will be a call workshop at SGU, and Sunday, JALT, our own JALT language teaching conference at Hokkaido, not here, at Hokkaido University this year. And so if you're thinking about submitting and haven't done it yet, please do so.
Well, at the same time, we don't want to mention about October 20th.
October 20th is?
The joint event here at Hokkaido.
Thanks, Lord.
Robert Korshen from the University of Waterloo.
That's right, that's right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, our keynote speaker for the language teaching conference on the 19th is Dr. Robert Korshen from the University of Ottawa, and he will also be speaking at JALT National, I understand, and that's why he's in the country. And we've organized a co-JALT and JAX event for Monday evening, October 20th, here at Hokkaido. JAX is the Japan Association of Canadian Studies, and he'll be talking about bilingual multiculturalism. Yeah, that's right. So there are 3 days of things to keep us busy in October.
Okay, thanks. I gotta move up here. You guys do so much more than we do. We're like real lazy now, actually. We don't have any of this kind of stuff, but that's all gonna change soon. A quick note, something we were just talking about. When I said about the strategies correlating negatively with language learning, I was talking about compensation strategies. Yeah? Like when people, rather than going and learning the language, they use things like avoidance or guessing from context. But when it comes to empowering strategies, like how do you say this, how do you say this in English, those kinds of things, knowing how to choose what words to learn versus which ones to ignore for now, that kind of thing. That's very important stuff. All right, so that's not all strategies are a waste, right?
So you're saying compensation strategies only can be a negative effect toward language
Yeah.
acquisition, but if it's used in conjunction with.
Well, basically those strategies that students use to avoid actually getting down and learning the language correlate negatively with language acquisition. So that's very specific kind of strategy, these compensation strategies, as opposed to ones that allow them to actively learn the language. For example, actual phrases like, how do you say this, and I don't understand, and could you repeat that again, please? These kinds of more strategic strategies, strategic competence. Okay? All right, so I'm going to fly through a little bit now because we've already covered a lot of this stuff. Basically, page 5, in the book, after every, if you were to look at, for example, page 8, page 8 and page 9, the first two, the next two pages are called language focus. There's a lot of Japanese in this section of the book. The reason there's two reasons. Number one, classroom management, or getting the book out of the classroom. Using the L1 for materials means that you do not have to be teaching students everything all the time. It allows students to take materials home and study on their own. If you look at any textbook by any of the Western publishers, they can't do that because there's just no explicit instruction. There can't be, because they're only using English. All right, so it allows students who have missed class or maybe who haven't gotten something to be able to go home and study. Number two thing, we've already talked about this, the content issue. Using the L1 allows you to teach whatever they need. And on the bottom page 5, there's something there's a unit on taking a taxi, and the guy says, here, let me help you with your bag. Let me is surprisingly difficult, okay, because there's no real exact translation in Japanese. Plus, in English, if I say if you're my big boss, I say, here, let me have your book, that would be quite rude. But if I say, oh, let me help you with your bag, or I'm doing something for you, let is quite polite. So there's a whole social dynamic involved with let. It's not just a simple translation. And that we were able to teach, and they get it right away. And then they're using let all the time because they find that to be an incredibly useful little thing, right? So again, use Japanese if there's something that is high level that cannot be demonstrated, right? That's a place for it. Okay, next page. This is a little bit of an activity here. Page 6 of your handout. In the communication focus of the book, which is the next 2 pages along, where the genre, for example, if it's asking somebody out, it looks at the functional side of what they're doing. It kind of breaks the conversation down for them so that they can then put it back together. All of the activity instructions in the book are in English. So if you're looking at, for example, page 12 and 13, they're in English. And the reason why they're in English is because when you're teaching something like this kind of like conversation practice, odds are they're going to be doing that in class, and you can demonstrate an awful lot of this. But what I want to get at here is that even though I would always recommend that when you can do something through English by demonstrating it, as long as it doesn't take up the whole class, you don't want to waste all your time just getting students to do something. That's what we were just talking about. When you can do it, you do it in English. But it's not as easy as you'd think. And in one of Noonan's books, in his Atlas series, one of the very first pages of this book that's meant for complete beginners, not false beginners, but complete beginners, it's got instructions that it's, well, how are they going to understand this? There's no way they can understand this because they don't have this vocabulary yet. So it's not always as easy as you think it is. To give you an example, if you could just work with someone around you, this is from an Italian textbook. Okay, so I've actually been nice enough to give you some words in Italian here so you know what they mean. Do you think you can work with a partner and figure out what you got to do here? Okay, the instructions are in Italian. Stai cercando un edificio, chiedi dove sta l'edificio che cerchi, lavori assieme a un compagno di classe, usa la pianta della città, le seguenti pagine. These kinds of instructions are exactly the kind you get in English. And if you look at these words, you've got more than enough to be able to guess what these mean.